Hello guys, we're back after a bit, well not really a hiatus, but you heard that we were running an event on the weekend, 2000 points, Grammarly combined arms. No other comp except some of the scenarios were from the match play guide have some tweaks made to them, I think, which are all pretty good things to make them more palatable. For example, we're playing a chance encounter here, but there was a special feature in the middle of the board, and there were forests to the side of that, and you could do the deployment where you wouldn't have to have forests, or you could have the deployment where you did, and there were also impassable and hills on the board, which you'll see. But the focus of this video really is all about the want to show you how sky lanterns might play in this game. So there's been a lot of chatter saying that they're broken. Maybe that's the case, but there was an opportunity for me to play against them on the weekend, and thanks to Paul, who, even though you'll see the models aren't painted at this point, it still would have taken a lot of work to assemble them at quick notice. And he's only playing one Sky Lantern, but had his Magistrate in it, who had a ward save, the terror causing item, and the Plague of Rust spell as well. So, bound spell. So, all in all, like a good one. And I want to sort of walk through the options here to show sort of what happened in this game, just to give you an idea of what they look like in the game, and I'll give you my thoughts on whether I think they're broken or not at the end. So, I'm not going to put the slide up, but if you're a regular listener, you know that our major sponsor is Pandemwargaming, and there's an affiliate link in the show notes for us. Jeff provides a lot of the terrain for me and Patty in these videos. The hills that you can see on the table, they are from his company that is a sponsor of our show, Pandemwargaming. And you can see there the bases too that we use for the forests. Those mushrooms came from his company. Actually, it looks like all the terrain came from his company. So some of the bases I'm using too. So if you're looking for terrain bases or any other sort of hobby accessories, it's all plastic, no resin, high quality stuff, and you'll see it looks really good on the tabletop when you use it. We want to thank him and all of our financial supporters as well. A lot of them had priority entrance into this event. So if you are a paid member of 2 Plus, we'll make sure you get in first. Thanks again for your support, guys. So what we're looking at here is I'm playing Vampire Counts. We've talked about a little bit in the last video about the idea behind the list. So you can see I've got Hex Wraiths, Graveguard, a Necromancer, a Mortis Engine, Crypt Ghouls, and some zombies, a Black Coach, some bats. I also have a Strigoi Ghoul King on a Terrorgeist behind this hill to hide from his Grand Cannons. The Mortis Engine is also out of view for that reason on the first turn. Paul has chosen to deploy his Sky Lantern in a defensive position. It's out of line of sight because I have screams that I could target it with. And you can see in this, the deployment is right up. So he's deployed in a quadrant that the rest of his army might not have been able to deploy in. I'm not sure if that's part of the format. We were experimenting a lot today. This is the first tournament we're playing with the new rules. But you can see in that shot below what it sort of looks like in proportion to his army. So it's out here on this right wing, behind what is a hill, out of line of sight of most of my army. And that presented some interesting issues in itself. Like he's giving up first turn, and a lot of armies don't play scouts, and by GW's rules, that means that you're getting the +1 modifier to the other player. So about 60, two-thirds, roughly two-thirds of the time, very roughly, the other player is going to go first. He was able to stay out of line of sight, so maybe that's a thing that matters. I think deciding, like I had to hedge and put, this depends on some of my ethereal units getting around to these war machines, so I'd put one set on each side. Are the Hex Race a threat? Toughness 5, 10 wounds with a 5+ ward save? Probably not. And it meant on this side later in the game, the Black Coach could get around and do some damage, but without magic weapons, he's not going to damage either of these things anyway. So maybe he just ignores them and tries to win. So first up, I wasn't really too bothered. I'd heard horrible things about what the Sky Lantern could do to infantry specifically. So let's get along and see what happened. It's important to note, so it's my turn. I move the Hex Wraiths forward, and I guess even though they're ethereal and they're marching column, which with the Mortis engine can be 27 inches, I believe you still have to get this back base past a model. Doesn't mean you pop through being ethereal. You can correct us if you're wrong, but really the movement has to clear that base, which I couldn't do. I was able to move them this far, so that meant he could block, that unit was blocking this obvious pathway. If you haven't played with or against Hex Wraiths before, they move over units. They're ethereal, so not really going to be damaged by much. They move over units and they're able to then deal a strength 4 no armor saves hit for each model that moves over it. It looks a little bit like Santa's sleigh. You've got 8 reindeer here, but in marching column, they can go 24 inches. If they're near a mortis engine, which gives +1 to necromantic undead, you're going to get another one. And so in this case, you're able to go very far and do these hits. But I still believe you have to clear. They can't use quick turn when they go, unless they're only moving their 8 or 9. And on top of that, the maneuverability is quite difficult. Even if you can go off the board, you have to finish your turn on the board. So when you saw that unit of Jade Lancers that Paul had before, they could beat these guys on combat res. They also had a character in there with a magic weapon who could have harmed them. So what I've done is it's blocked those, but then on Paul's turn, he jumps over with the movement and he starts the first barrage. Didn't do much, interestingly. I was expecting a lot more. So one of the things that is probably worth pointing out is that you can't, you can only choose one missile attack per turn. So you can only choose the crane guns or you can arm them with dragonfire bombs themselves, and both of them are pretty good. The lantern comes equipped with bombs. They were a dud for Paul, so it misfired on a 1, dealing a wound to itself, and then it rolled off a lot of strength 4 hits, but they just didn't really hit or wound. They killed 3 Graveguard, which we talked about. Look, vampires are going to be able to bring those back, but if I had any sort of infantry, like 20 infantry and lost 3 to that sort of attack, I don't think that would be a big deal. So to me, whether or not is it capable of poor rolling? Yep, I think so. So that's a thing too. Um, so I don't think its ability to shoot with the crane guns is significantly worse than what Outriders can put out at the moment, who are also very mobile. Is it worse than things? So on a 3+, you're getting some action from those bombs. There's a lot of variance to there, which we'll talk about in the next turn. So at this point, I think, is it a good shooting platform? Yes. Is it broken? Not at the moment. If there were, if there are multiples, we'll get into that in a second. So then, just to point out, Paul had lumbered at the end of that turn. That's why it's now squared up, which is a great little thing for not a unit of this type, a heavy chariot or a monster that has reserve move. So you can do a lot of this very highly maneuverable action, which we'll talk to a bit later on as well. So I'm able to then, like, the plan with this army is I have a lot of I have 3 Wailing Dirges. So I'm able to max out my Wailing Dirges here and get 3 off, and Paul rolls quite well. He ends up taking a couple of wounds, which you can see through a 1 wound, but he doesn't take enough. So he's rolled enough, even with the -2, to survive this turn. So a bit more of a testament against Wailing Dirge. But I think what we're really looking at is wards plus the 10 wounds for the character is a big deal. So when we're talking about something that is as good as Outriders, who I think are becoming a format defining unit or an A tier unit that can, especially because they're very good against Bretonnia. What happens there is you're looking at this, combining that with something else that we think is very good in the metagame, which is that sort of layered saves on a combined profile. So at this point, you've got that crazy survivability of, say, a Wyvern with 3 saves or a Dragon with 3 saves. And then on top of that, you've got the shooting platform that is comparable to Outriders. So it's going to be a good unit no matter what it costs, really. So on Paul's turn, he then skips it through here. So you can see that's where I had moved this Terrorgeist forwards. The lighting was a bit poor, so I've sort of cropped off some things here that were blurry. And because there wasn't much else it could attack at that, it's still got close order, so it's front arcing you. It went for the mortise engine and didn't really do any damage. The bomb scattered, which I thought was interesting, so that reliability is still there, unreliability is still there of a war machine. But the shots too were saved, so you've got mortise engine, full plate armor. I had the talisman of protection on top of that and regen 5 plus. So in the shooting phase, that's a lot of dilution of damage. So at this stage, it hasn't really had much of an effect at all. Moving on from that, I get one more turn. You can see like the dirge had got it down to this point to 5 wounds. So I did get another set off in that last turn and did some real damage to it. The wards were still very helpful and saved a lot. So I'm not at that. I've done 50% of damage at this point, but I'm not at that 25% magic mark to gain points yet. And now you're starting to see like it's going to be very difficult for the dirges to get through. On that third turn, my Banshee was too far away to come back. I failed. I didn't get the reserve move signature spell off. I've had to sort of give up with the Strigoi Terror guys to be able to threaten flank charges for other units. And the Mortis engine was what got lucky and got through and did some damage. So what you see next is the maneuverability of the Sky Cannon is on full display. Sky Cannon, Sky Lantern. Sorry, Ogres players. But you can see it's then able to jump over again and then start and lumber back. And it has another bunch of shots at some units, killing some things, but not a lot really, to do a lot of damage. And it's escaped over there, ended up on 6 wounds in the end, which didn't hit the magic number for me to score points. So this was very skillful, I thought, from Paul. I think it has to stay sort of within 12 inches to be able to use all its attacks. So if we're looking for the features, it's got this crane guns are very good. It's going to do that bombing run where you might get lucky, is what I feel. And then you're going to go through to its combined profile. Now, if you're just playing it in the rare slot, you're not going to get that. You're still going to have 7 wounds, but you're not going to have that ward that makes it incredible, at least with a spell. And beyond that, then you've got to be able to make sure that it's going to get through, and the moving side of things is quite good. So you've got the reserve move and the lumbering, and that means you can really position it any way you want. And what would have probably happened here is I probably would have had one more go with the Wailing Dirge from the Mortis engine, and then it would have skipped back to the other side of the board. So I would have had to do those 4 wounds, which hopefully would have got the spells off. But the game had to end there. I was a tournament organizer. We sort of had to dick around at the start of the game, and we had to play very cagely, which I have more videos on because I actually thought the Grand Cannons were incredible in this game, and they meant that I wasn't able to be as aggressive as I would have liked. So, in summary, what I would say about is it broken? I think no, and I'm going to say why. So, firstly, I think if you play 3 to 5 of anything, it's broken because there are things that you can't deal with in the game. So if you want to play all ethereal, you're going to run into armies that can't do anything against you. And I think we need to start thinking about broken replacing the word interactivity. And I think there's plenty of this in Warhammer at the moment. I've got a problem with tournament Warhammer that really its skew lists do well. And this will be something I allude to when I sort of recount my experiences with vampire counts. But if you play an all-comers list, there's more skill, there's more interactivity, but you have to spread yourself thin. If you play a skew list, you do one thing incredibly well. And if your opponent doesn't have the tools, well, maybe they should bring an iPad and sit on that while you feel around. So what I would say here is the 3 things that make it really good so far are the Outrider level potential shots, which is huge in this metagame because it's not only great against infantry, but you need to be able to deal with things like Peg Knights, which you can only attack from range. And on top of that, if you do put a character in the Lantern and can give it saves and more wounds, then it's very, like 10 wounds of anything by itself, even at toughness 5, is hard to kill. But when you're giving it a ward save as well, pretty much it's 13 wounds on the odds, or 14 even. So what's happening there is like that's a lot already to have to try to take down. And then we combine that with the maneuverability. There is a lot of skill in the maneuver. If you want to sort of rip across using weapons that have a 12-inch or 9-inch range, you've got to be pretty good at doing that. You got to find places to put it. You've got to face the right way. And to me, that's what the skill in Warhammer is often really about. So that's where that is with that unit. I think, like, really, my summation is if you think it's broken, it's because, yeah, people are playing five against you. And if you thought the Warhammer rules didn't already have this problem, I don't know what to tell you. I think 360 charge peg knights were already that sort of problem. And there are plenty of places where people play 10 each of those. Wailing Dirge is pretty good. You've still got other things in the metagame that have the survivability of the lantern as well. So really, maybe a top-down view of where the play is in Warhammer is probably where we need to get to. I know in this channel, Patty and I are really into that. It's not often that we hear people say, "Oh, well played, they pulled something off." This tournament had a lot of good players and a lot of good play, but most of the conversation will be about lists and what's broken. So if we could do things to dilute them, I'm glad. Western Sydney was pretty quick at making 0 to 2 of anything the limit, and that's going to take balloons into account. You'll only be able to take two, whether they are monstrous mounts or sorry, character mounts or not. I think that's a great start. But yes, I would probably say my experience at this stage is it was really fun to play against. I thought it was a good part of the army, and it was probably only the second scariest thing I faced in that list on that day. So we'll find out the rest of that later, but thanks again, guys, for watching. We'll see you next time.